Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fighter Heart Podcast. I'm here with Sydney Adkisson. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
So we like to just get right into it. We want to know, maybe introduce yourself a little, say where you're from, give us a little about your background, and then get into your Fighter Heart story.
So I am Sydney. I am 25 years old. I am from Lexington, Kentucky. So I went to the University of Kentucky for undergrad and grad school. So go Cats, of course. But right out of undergrad, I was working at a hospital. So I graduated in 2020 from undergrad. And so I was working in the hospital on the floor and stuff during COVID. And then I started working in cancer research for a little bit. And a couple days after I left my job, I got a new job. I worked the new job for 3 days, and then I actually got hit by a car on my motorcycle. So I had worked the same job for like 4 years and then turned around and had a new job for 3 days, no benefits, nothing. Luckily, still was 22 at the time. And so I was still on my parents' insurance, thank the Lord. Because if I wouldn't have been, I probably would have had a very different outcome than what I had.
Wow.
Um,
Have you
but
always ridden motorcycles? Were you like new to it or?
Yeah, so I have ridden since I was 16. My mom had me get my license when I was 16 because my mom also rides. And so my mom has also been hit on a motorcycle. She still has all of her limbs though. So yeah, I've been riding motorcycles, I mean, since I could remember. I mean, I used to ride on the back with my mom for a while when I was a kid. Um, and I grew up in that kind of lifestyle. So when I got to college, I got my own. And then I got my first Harley right before I graduated college. It was kind of like a graduation birthday gift. And I had it for about a year and a half before somebody turned out in front of me. So, yeah, the actual story goes is the guy, he was sitting at a flashing yellow light, which I understand that some states now, when I told the story on TikTok, a lot of people were like, what is a flashing yellow light? I thought that that was like pretty common everywhere. It seems as though it's not. So we have flashing yellow lights here to where if there's no oncoming traffic, you're allowed to turn left.
Mhm.
Well, this guy decided to turn left in front of oncoming traffic, which was me. And there was actually another car like not that far behind me, and there was a car in front of me. So I guess his story was is that he couldn't see me behind the car that he like turned after, which, you know, if you can't see, then don't turn. Apparently that should be explained to people.
Was he
So he
going
turned out.
fast too? Was he driving fast?
No, he was at a stoplight,
Um,
and so when he made that turn, he was actually going too slow. If he would have sped up, he actually would have made it. But the oncoming traffic, we had a speed limit of 50 miles an hour. So, I mean, we're coming way too fast for there, in my personal opinion, to even be a light flashing there. It should just be a turning signal, but it's not. And the city won't fix it, even though there has been this same type of accident multiple times and multiple fatalities at these intersections. So yeah, he turned and I hit his back quarter panel of his car at like 50 miles an hour with no helmet on.
Jesus.
So I am definitely lucky to even be alive.
What do you
When I was
remember?
coming,
Did you like after you hit the car, did you pass out or?
no, so I remember everything. I was awake the entire time. So I actually hit him coming about 45, 50 miles an hour. I hit the brakes as hard as I could, realized that there was absolutely, in like a split second, realized there was no way that I was gonna like miss him or not lay the bike down. I knew I was gonna hit him because I mean my speed was just too fast to slow down on a bike that quickly and without throwing myself over the front handlebars. And so I actually decided to jump really at the like last second while the bike was making contact with the van. And so I was just hoping and praying that the person that was in the fast lane was paying attention and saw me and saw the accident about to occur, which they did. They slammed on their brakes, and so they did not run me over. So when I jumped over the edge, my right foot caught the peg when I came over, and it like kind of tore my foot basically off, but not off.
Oh,
Um, so I landed on my hands. I broke both my hands during the accident too. So I landed on my hands, catching myself, and then I kind of just rolled over onto my side. And then, obviously like 100 people called 911 because I mean, we were in the middle of rush hour traffic pretty much. So there were tons of cars and people around
were
in
you
the
in
city.
pain? Were you in pain or was it shock?
Oh yeah, no, I was in pain for sure. I was screaming the entire time. And kind of a funny story now, I didn't realize how quickly, so I assumed that when I got to the hospital, like the hospital would call my emergency contact, which was my mom, and then my mom would let everyone know. Well, it turns out there was actually somebody sitting in the traffic from the accident because they didn't have anywhere to divert them around. So they all just got stuck sitting there for like 2 hours while they cleaned everything up. And so there was somebody sitting in the traffic that got out of their car and was on the phone and was like, oh my God, she was like, I think I've seen this bike before on Facebook. And so she called one of my friends' daughters who I worked with one of my friends, and she had seen my bike on her daughter's Facebook page because I had let her grandkids sit on it. And so she called her friend who was at her mom's house, and then her mom called my mom and was like, we're not 100% sure, but we think Sydney's been in an accident and it's not a good one.
Oh,
So my mom ended up, my parents live like an hour and a half from me. And they made it down here like pretty much like
oh.
right after I got to the hospital.
So
Because
that was a big coincidence then. It's not like it was like a very
yeah,
small area. Like,
no, I mean, I live in a city with like 350,000 people. So, I
yeah.
mean, the odds that somebody just knew it from, which I did have a custom paint job done on the bike, and that's how she knew it was me. So she was like, she's not dead. Like, she is very vocal currently. Like, she is alive. But she
Oh.
was like, she is not in good shape. So, yeah, my mom hauled butt to get down to where I live and
How
call my
quickly did
dad.
how quickly did they get you to the hospital? Like, how long were you on the
Oh,
ground?
I was like less than 2 miles from the hospital. So luckily it didn't take very long. And I was like I half a mile down from the fire department.
Oh,
So I was like literally almost in front of the fire department. So when they got called, they were like there in less than 10 minutes. So it didn't take very long to get like from the accident to the hospital. I could not tell you the exact timing at all because once they gave me drugs, I was out. I don't remember much of anything that occurred after that. I have bits and pieces up until like 2 days after the accident. So I just have like little fragments, and then I have stuff of people like retelling me things.
what's
So
the
it was
first
also,
thing? Yeah, sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say it was during COVID too. So like none of my family could come back into the room with me either.
Oh yeah, cool. That's even yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
what's the first thing you remember after you woke up, like the concretely?
I remember asking for food and I had broke both my hands. I was in a sea collar. I had also broke the only limb that I had that was solid was my left leg. And I'm laying there and I asked this nurse to bring me food after I just had an 8-hour surgery. And he was like, you're sure you're hungry? I was like, dude, I'm starving. Please bring me something to eat. And I specifically remember he sat the food down on the table in front of me and walked out. And I'm sitting there with both of my hands in casts in a sea collar, laying down, and I'm like, I just screamed. There was an explicitive that was in this sentence, but I just screamed, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And like, there, it was just like curtained walls in the PACU. And so my actual nurse, and not the nurse assistant who had dropped it off, walked in, and she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, I just looked down and I looked around. I was like, "I'm hungry, but what did he expect me to do with this?"
Yeah.
And she just started laughing. She was like, "I'm so sorry." She was like, "I guess he just like truly did not think about it." And I was like, "Obviously." That was the first memory I have waking up. And then asking somebody what time it was, and they were like, "Oh, it's 3." And I was like, "Oh, 3 a.m." And they were like, "No, it's 3 p.m. the next day." And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
"Oh, okay." So I've been out for quite a while. And because there was so many people with like COVID and stuff in the hospital, there were no beds. So I ended up stuck in post-op for like 3 days.
Dang.
Um, so yeah, it was kind of crazy, but I finally got a room after that, and I was in the hospital for 10 days afterwards. So I actually wasn't in the hospital super long.
Yeah, 10 days and you were out?
Yeah, so I didn't actually have my leg amputated until 9 months post accident, or 7 months post accident. So I got hit in March of 2021, and my doctor, my surgeon said, "I'm gonna do my best to like save your foot." And I was like, "Okay, let's try it." So I had my foot was in this gigantic cast. I had an X fix in the side of my foot. I had 3 rods coming out of the bottom of my foot. Um, and then after I had like crushed my heel, I'd crushed my ankle, I had a Lisfranc fracture in the top of my foot, and none of my toes were connected to my foot. So they had to like put everything back together. He called it scrambled eggs for a long time,
Mhm.
which wasn't funny then, but it's funny now. And so he like put everything back together as best as he could. 2 weeks later, I had to go and have the cast taken off. So they took the cast off of my foot, and he was like, "Cool, now you have to move it." And he was like, "You have to go to physical therapy and get your like ankle and foot and everything moving." Um, that turned out to be practically impossible. I did not have enough muscle function. I didn't have enough soft tissue. It had destroyed my nerve endings in my foot so bad that like no matter what I did, I mean, I could just be sitting and it was painful. So my physical therapist did the best that he could. We got it to where like my foot was hanging like this pretty much, and I could like get it up to about neutral, and that was about it. And so I went back in about 4 weeks later, and my doctor just looked at me and he was like, "There is absolutely no way that," he was like, "You went from potentially having like 90% usage of your foot," and he said, "I would give you maybe 50 now." And he was like, "I can do some things and stuff," but he was like, "It's not looking good for your function." And being told that at like 22 years old, that's kind of like a difficult thing to be told. You're like, okay, like I'm a very active person. I've played soccer my entire life. I've played pretty much any sport you could probably think of, and or at least tried it in some aspect. And I surf, I snowboard, I wakeboard. So I do all these like extreme sports, and I ride motorcycles and stuff. And so I was like, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to live with like 50% usage of my foot. And so we like sat there, and he was like, "All right, well, we're gonna cast it." And I was like, "Okay." So on my birthday, on my 23rd birthday, fun. I had to have surgery again to have everything, all the hardware removed out of my foot. And so they put it in a cast. And I went through like 3 casts, and then I went to a boot. Well, by the time I made it to the boot, it was just, I mean, I could put the boot on, but I couldn't put the boot on the ground. So I couldn't even put any remote pressure to have the boot on the ground. I couldn't put any pressure through my foot. So at
Wow.
this point, I'm like 7 months in, or 6 months in, I'm going back to physical therapy for my foot. And my physical therapist, I mean, she's doing her best to work with me, and I couldn't even get a sock on my foot. Like I was just putting my foot directly in the boot. I was sleeping in the boot because of my foot like could not touch the anything in the bed because it hurt so bad. And so I went back to my doctor and he was like, I'm going to be honest with you. He was like, I told you this months ago, but he was like, I do not think that this is the best route for you. He was like, I think that amputation is going to be the best route for you. He was like, you've tried, you did your best, you did everything you could. I've done everything I could. He was like, we can try another surgery, but you're going to be waiting like 6 or 7 months to even attempt to have the surgery. And he was like, and if you can't put pressure down through it and get blood flow through all those muscles and the tissue, it's never going to heal. And I was like, I can't, I can't, like, it physically hurts so bad. It makes me want to throw up every time I try to put my foot on the ground. And so it was kind of at that point that I was like,
Were
yeah,
you,
I'm
were
done.
you considering it before that conversation at all?
Sort of, but not. I was not definitely not mentally stable enough to be considering that as an option. I was on so many medications that trying to make a decision like that on, nerve medication, pain medication, all of those things is like super difficult because you're an emotional roller coaster all the time. So I definitely told him, I was like, I don't understand why you think that I was going to be able to make this decision like clearly. I was like, my brain is just fog. And I was like, it's just so much fog. And so I finally pulled off some of the medications. And then before I went back to have the conversation with him, and he sent me to a prosthetic office here in town. And he was like, look, just go in there and talk to them, tell them that you're thinking about like amputation, and they will walk you through everything. Because at that point, like I didn't know anybody that had ever had a limb amputated ever. So
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, I had watched the Paralympics and stuff like that, but like I didn't know any of those people. And so I was just kind of like, I mean, I didn't have any idea what to expect.
Yeah.
And so I went in and I talked to them for probably like 2 hours, and they were amazing. They sat and answered every question that I had. It made me feel super comfortable. And I was like, okay, I think that like I'm solid to make this decision now. Like I think that I will be fine. And so I went back to my doctor and I was like, all right, let's do it. And because it was still during COVID, I actually had to have my surgery done outpatient. So I had it done
Oh,
in the morning and went home that afternoon.
well,
Um, which was probably not the best decision, but it was either that or wait like 7 months potentially to have the surgery done. And at that point, I was like, I'm over this. Like, I want to get back to walking. I haven't walked in 9 months. I've been stuck in a wheelchair, and I live in a very rural state that is definitely not set up for people with disabilities in any realm. I mean, I even live in one of the bigger cities, and it's still terrible to try to get around in a wheelchair here. And we don't have public transportation and
yeah.
stuff like that where I'm from. And so it was just a very difficult aspect to try to live alone, but be stuck in a wheelchair. And so, and my house was not handicap accessible by any means. I mean, I luckily have a house that like is one floor, but like you had stairs to get into the house. So at that point I was like, I'm done. So I actually started a master's program because I got so bored and did not have anything to do because I didn't have a job at this point. And I was like, well, I'm getting my leg amputated. So like I can't go back, I can't go get a job right now because then I'm gonna be off recovering. So I was like, well, I'll just go get a 1 year master's degree. And so uh I went back. I knew these people for like a month, and I had to tell everybody like a month into the program. I was like, hey, by the way, like next week I'm having my leg cut off of my body. So I went up to all my professors and I was like, I'm only gonna miss this day of class. I'm only gonna miss the Thursday, the day of surgery, because we didn't have class again until Monday. So I was like, I'll be back on Monday. And they were like, oh, what are they doing? Because everybody knew I was in a boot and stuff and was on crutches and couldn't walk. They were like, oh, are they like fixing your ankle? And I was like,
Kind
not
of.
quite.
Yeah.
I was like, sorta. And they were all like, are you okay? And I was like, I mean, I'm fine. I had come to terms with it like a month prior of waiting for like the surgery date to come. And so like I was fine with it and it didn't bother me because in my head I'm thinking, okay, this is my chance to get back to my life. Like I can get back to doing the things that I want to do instead of sitting here fighting my foot that is never going to be what it was before. So yeah, I actually had surgery and I went back to class the next week on Zoom for like a week, and then I went back into in-person class for a while after like 2 weeks. Um,
Wow.
I just tied my
Crutches, I guess.
pants.
Crutches, right?
Yeah, yeah, on crutches. Yeah, so I just tied my pants at the bottom. I rolled them up and tied them so that I didn't trip over the bottom edge of my pants because at this point it was winter, so it was cold outside.
Wow.
And so I just came back to class, and I mean, I got some of the weirdest looks on a college campus. I mean, people are like, wait, hold on, doing double takes really quick. Like, where is the bottom of her leg? Why is she here? Uh, I was like, I mean, I don't really care when people stare and stuff. That kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. And so I was just like, all right, whatever. Like I just kept going on my crutches and stuff. Like we would make jokes about it. I mean, we would go to bars and stuff after class sometimes. And people would just be like, oh, you're on crutches. Did you break your foot? And I would just like kind of lift my leg up and I was like, kinda. And they would like drunk people would freak out. It was so
Oh
funny.
my gosh.
I
Well,
mean, we would make jokes standing on the sidewalks and stuff, waiting to get into bars, and people would kind of turn and look at us, and they're like, "Are they bullying this girl? Like, what is happening?" So,
well,
luckily, I found some really good friends that are pretty pretty cool when I was in my master's program.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of support, right, from family and friends.
Absolutely, yeah, tons of it.
Good, good. What was the recovery process like? So like and like learning how to, live your life with one foot.
Oh gosh. Well, I will say showering is probably my biggest gripe. I mean, getting in and out, like at my own house, I'm fine. Like I've got my how I'm gonna do it, I've got it down. When I'm traveling though, and I like to travel quite a bit, it is the biggest pain in the butt, I will say. I I actually the one and only time that I ever fell was trying to take a shower at a motocross race over the summer because for whatever reason we thought it would be a bright idea. We were like, "Oh, don't stand on the muddy like grass in the shower," because we had like a pop-up shower type of thing outside. And we were like, "Oh, don't stand on the muddy grass. We'll stand on a tarp." And I was like, in hindsight, when I did that, like after I fell, I was like, why did we think a wet tarp was like
Yeah.
the right idea here?
Yeah.
Um, Terrible, terrible idea, terrible move on our part. But I think showering was the biggest thing that I had to adapt to. And then I had lost so much muscle mass in my right quad that when I started with my prosthetic, I actually couldn't start in a pin lock like most people do. I could have if I wore a sleeve, but we decided to go against it because I had so little quad muscle that my kneecap wouldn't stay in place. It would just slip and slide wherever it wanted to because there was no muscle to keep it where it was supposed to be.
Oh,
Um, so my physical therapist, we actually determined a couple weeks into me having a prosthetic that we had to tape my kneecap down for the first like 6 months of me trying to walk so that I could like focus on my quad muscle um, and get it to like stop moving around. Luckily, we have a physical therapist here in town that actually like she mostly works only with like amputee patients. So I know there are some horror stories that people have had from going to physical therapists that like didn't know what they were doing in terms of like gait and walking with an amputee. So we actually get pretty lucky, and she has people come in from like 3 and 4 hours away um, to see her because she knows what she's doing. But yeah, my kneecap moving around, she started pushing it around at some point, and I like started like almost throwing up. And she was like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? And I was like, I don't like that. She was like, you've had your entire leg cut off of your body and you have a problem with your kneecap shifting around. I was like, yeah, it feels gross. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Are you
Um,
are you so like you said it took 6 months to build up the muscles, so would it move around basically?
Yes, so it would just like move around in my socket whenever I had my socket on. So it would just like shift side to side. Like if I would step like slightly on my right side, it would like shift that direction and hit the side of my like prosthetic. It was uncomfortable. It did not feel good at all. And I mean, it took me about I was on crutches for a while because I just did not have enough muscle to like swing through and walk correctly. So I was on two crutches for about 2 months, walking with crutches. It was like 2 to 3, and then I was able to get down to one crutch. And then after like 3 weeks with one crutch, I got down to a cane. So it took me probably about 5 months, 4.5 to 5 months to completely get off any walking aids. Um, and which is longer than most people who have it done immediately.
Doesn't sound too long. Doesn't sound long to me. I
It
mean,
it
yeah.
it doesn't sound long. It felt really long in hindsight. Um, so I got down, and then my big thing is my family was going to Europe, and we had planned this trip to go to Europe, and I was like, I will not miss this trip. So I got my first prosthetic in December, in the middle of December of 2021, and our trip was in June of 2022. So I was like, I will be going on this trip. I am not gonna miss it. And so I was like, I'm bound and determined. Well, I ended up getting a job before I graduated, and I had a job in April, and so I was completely off all my aids by the middle of April because I
Wow.
was working at a distillery too. So I was like, you know, I've always been the type of person that is like, I don't like to ask for help when it comes to certain things. And so I was like, I've got to be able to do this job without asking like a ton of people for help and lifting and moving and stuff like that. So I was like rolling barrels into the backs of trucks at
That's
like
crazy.
after about 4 months after I had my prosthetic. And so yeah, my PT and my prosthetist were like, whoa, like you don't have to go so fast. And I was like, I'm fine. Like I feel fine. I was still walking with a limp pretty bad at that point. Um, just because I, still wasn't super confident in how I was walking. I don't really walk with a limp now unless I'm just super tired or like fatigued and stuff. Or I like, catch my foot and trip and fall because I do that sometimes. Um,
Wow, I mean
but
that's cool. It's like any you should just schedule like a trip to Europe anytime you're unmotivated or
right,
something, you know, it's like
yeah,
yeah.
I was like, there's 11 family members of us going to Europe. I was like, I am not going to be left behind. And so my family is the type of family that they're like, you're going to like, we're going to push you. We're not going to let you just sit there and slack. And so, which I'm a very self-motivated person anyways. So, you know, I was definitely sitting there and I was like, I can't, like, I want my life back. That was what was going through my head every time I went to physical therapy. I was like, I want to get back to doing the things that I did before and doing things that I didn't do before that I hadn't got to try yet. Cause, I was 22 when I lost my leg. Well, when I had my accident, I was 23 when I lost it. I'm 25 now. And so, I mean, in the last 2 years, I just hit my 2 year anniversary on September 15th. Um, so I've been 2 years without my leg, and I mean, I've traveled all over the world. I've traveled to new cities. I've walked, 16, 17 miles, 22 miles in a day.
Can you still
I've,
ride a motorcycle?
oh, I have one. Yep.
Uh,
I went back and bought another one. So I've ridden motorcycles. I've actually learned one of my friends is teaching me how to ride a dirt bike. So he sucked me on a dirt bike. I've been snowboarding. I lake surf. I don't surf in the ocean. I don't know how to do that. I got mad respect for anybody who could surf in an ocean. Um, but I lake surf. I have been back to, I started skateboarding. I'm not very good at it, but I go to the skate park and I do my best.
So in a way, you're
Um,
more active than when you had
oh
two.
yeah, for sure. I think I have done more in the last 2 years than I did in the 5 years prior. I think. I mean, I've traveled so many places. I've been to a lot of motocross events. I got really into. I've been a photographer for the last 10 years. I got super into photographing motocross events now. So that kind of sparked life back into my creative side too, because I started getting to the point where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I actually plan on starting to compete in snowboard cross events this winter. So yeah, I
Oh,
was like, why not? I mean, it's kind of a funny thing when you almost die when you're 22. Um, because you're kind of in that phase of life where you're like, okay, so you're low 20s. A lot of people have fun, they go out and do things, they travel a lot in their low 20s. And then, I did that. My life kind of came to a complete halt for almost a year. And so I was like, well, it's almost like you get to restart.
and it's
Um,
so funny that it was on your birthday, like that you
yeah,
had like your
Yeah,
new
one of my
life.
surgeries. Yeah, I was like, one of my surgeries on my birthday. I got hit a month before my birthday, and then I had a surgery on my birthday, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is so much fun. Um, but yeah, I mean, your life kind of comes to a screeching halt, and then you kind of have to decide, okay, well, how am I, what is my life going to look like now? Am I going to just work a desk job and, which I work a desk job, but am I just gonna work a desk job and then just, live like a pretty basic life, get married, have kids, or whatever somebody wants to do? Or am I gonna go back to my adventurous life that I had before and and not let anything stop what I was doing before? And so I was like, I'm not a sedentary person. I don't know how to just come home after work and be at home. I've never been that type of person. And so I was like, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna get back to doing everything that I did before. And it's kind of one of those things that makes you realize how short life actually truly is for everyone. I mean, it can be taken from you in a millisecond, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your fault. I truly believe that when life is going to take me, it's going to do it no matter what I was doing. I know people that have been paralyzed from slipping and falling on a rock and they just hit their head. They were standing on a rock and it was wet and they just slipped and fell back and ended up paralyzed from the neck down. I mean, it's kind of those things that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen and there's nothing we can do to go back and change it. So, I mean, I could be upset about it and upset that it happened and frustrated if I want to, but then that's taking my future from me, is how I saw it. So I was like, it's already taken part of me. So I was like, I'm not going to let it take my future away from me and doing things that I want to do just because,
Yeah.
I look a little different now. So, I mean, there are things that I wish that didn't exist, like phantom pains. I really wish I didn't have those.
Like you phantom pain, I assume that's like your foot hurts, but there's no foot there.
Yeah, so or it itches. That's more of a sensation, but the itching is the worst in my opinion because it's a literal itch you cannot scratch. So you
Yeah.
just have to sit there and wait for it to pass, and it is so
I
so
can't even
irritating.
imagine that. I guess it's relatable to you ever feel like you have an itch under your skin and you can't scratch.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
that.
that's pretty much what it feels like a lot of the time. And my foot, the way that I describe my foot to people is so I had the TMR surgery, so my foot feels like it's still there, but it feels like I can feel it when I walk. Like I can feel the heel toe connection when I walk. My
Oh,
brain still registers that, which is different from um a lot of people who don't have the TMR surgery. And so I can feel that when I walk, but the problem that I've associated with it is that my foot feels like it's asleep all the time. So
Oh,
that pins and needles feeling that you get when your foot's asleep. At this point, have just like tuned it out for the most part.
yeah.
Um, but that's what it feels like all the time is that your
Oh,
foot's just
geez.
asleep and you can't get it to go away.
And when you feel the sensation of walking on your heel toe, like it feels like your foot's asleep, like when it stings even more, like that.
So it actually doesn't sting more when I'm walking. It feels
Just
the
the same.
same.
Okay.
It's just, yeah, I mean, it's just pretty consistent throughout. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, I was explaining it to some physical therapist, some soon to be physical therapist, and there was a panel of us, and everybody else sitting on the panel was like, wait, hold on. Because I thought that was normal. I thought everyone felt their like foot as it was rolling over, and they were like, no, we just don't feel anything. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, that is not how my brain is registering my foot still there. So
Wow, that's
I,
interesting.
yeah, and it's mapped and everything. So actually, if I'm having like a phantom pain in one specific spot, if I don't have my like socket on, I can usually try to massage that spot out, and it will like lessen the
Oh,
phantom pain.
that's
So
interesting. Wow.
it's a little different. It's not standard of care for it to be a surgery. I had an ortho doc and a plastic surgeon in my surgery. So it's relatively new in lower limb amputees. It's been a thing for upper limbs for a long time, but it's definitely relatively new for lower limbs. So there's only a couple of people that I've actually even known that have done it, which was definitely a shot in the dark when I think about it now. I was like, ooh, I agreed to something that was, but at that point, it was kind of like, well, I mean, does it really matter? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably have pain anyway, so,
Wow.
but
You,
way less pain than I had prior to my amputation. So,
yeah, no, it's totally worth it.
oh, for
Um,
sure.
so I mean, I guess that's we got your pretty much your whole story.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone maybe like they're on the fence about whether they should amputate or not? Someone who's in a similar situation, like how do you deal with that decision?
So I've actually had a few people send me messages on TikTok and Instagram and stuff with this exact same scenario pretty much like, hey, something happened. I've been fighting this for a long time. And they always ask me a bunch of questions and stuff like that, which I'm more than open to people sending me messages and stuff and talking it through with them. But the same thing that I always come back to with all of them is I don't regret what I did. I got my life back. Um, so a lot of people, and I think my biggest advice that I give to anybody, it's the mindset that you go into it with. Because the mindset that I went into my surgery with was this is giving me my life back. Like this is not taking life away from me. This is not going to reduce my quality of life. Um, it's going to make my life better. So I think going into my surgery with that mindset and not letting it bother me from day one was the biggest I think it was the most helpful because it pushed me to, you know, work hard in physical therapy, but also understand that, you know, I found a lot more patience with myself. I was the most impatient person in the world prior to my accident. And I gained a lot of patience with myself. And you know, there are frustrating days. Not every day is 100%, and I am by far not perfect at all. Um, and there are days where I'm like, you know, screw this prosthetic. I want to throw it out the window. This thing's making me mad. It broke today. Like the button's broke. I've got, you know, air seeping through. This is not feeling good, and I am beyond frustrated. But at the end of the day, you know, I wake up the next day and I'm like, I'm still alive. Like, you know, I still got to live another day and I still get to be here I get to see my brother graduate from high school next year. I would have never got to see that. I would have never got to go walk through Europe with him or, lake surf with him if I would have kept my leg and stuff. So, I've been able to do everything with my brother that I was still doing before, and now we make jokes about it. It's made everybody a lot funnier too. So, I mean, we all make jokes about my 5 toes and all that fun stuff. And so, I mean, we just make light of it. And I think that's my biggest thing that I tell everybody is like, just make sure you're in the right mindset and you make light of what happened because it will make your life so much easier. If you're upset about it and you're ticked and you know, you're like, this should have never happened to me, and you let it affect, like, it's going to take your future from you too. So, like, you know, it is what it is what I live by. As cheesy as it sounds, I mean, stuff's gonna happen whether we want it to or not, whether we want to control it. But you know, I don't regret it. I would never take it back. I've met some of the coolest people in my life through, nubbability camps, and just like talking to people online and stuff like that. And I've got friends all over the United States now that, we all go through the same problems every day. So, we talk and stuff, and I've met some cool people. I've done some cool stuff.
Mhm.
I get to coach kids with limb differences to like snowboard, and it's one
Yeah,
of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done in my life. So, I just tell people, make sure you're in the right mindset and don't let it take your future from you.
yeah, don't be the victim.
Yeah.
Awesome, Sydney. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks
of
for taking the
course.
time. Thanks for sharing your story. Is there anything you didn't say that you want to say?
I don't think so. I think just the big takeaway that I gave, I mean, I I live my life regardless of my disability and stuff like that. So, it may be frustrating on some days and I'm like, I'm gonna throw this thing out the window, but for 95% of my days, and I think my other big takeaway too that I did forget was people are gonna stare, people are gonna make comments, people are gonna be rude. I have come across very, very rude people. Most of the time it's adults. Um, so I think one of my big takeaways are for adults that have kids, especially younger kids, let them ask questions. Let them act. Don't shush them in a store. Don't look at your kid and be like, don't say that. Don't
Yeah,
be loud. Like, they're curious. They want to know. Like, let them ask questions. I mean, 98% of the amputees that I know are, or limb different people that I know are never going to have a problem with a kid asking them a question.
yeah,
And I think that's the only way that we build tolerance and respect and understand that, like, hey, this doesn't stop me. Like, I can do everything that you can do. Like, this doesn't stop me um, from, living my life and stuff. I had a little kid walk up to me not that long ago, and she couldn't have been any more than 3 years old. And she was like, your robot leg is so cool. And her mom just turned around. Her mom didn't even realize that she was like talking to me. And she was like, "Oh my gosh." She was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "It's fine." I was like, "Does she know someone that like has a prosthetic?" She was like, "No, she came up with that all on her own." And I was like, "That was so funny." And I was like, it was hilarious. And she was like, "It's so cool. Like, can I touch it?" She was like, "I want one." And I was like, "I don't think you actually want
you
one."
don't.
And I was like,
Yeah,
but you can play with it and like I can teach you about it and stuff. And so I ended up talking to her daughter for a while, and I was like, she might be 3 and the odds that she remembers that when she gets older, probably not super high, but she will understand the next time she sees somebody that looks like that. Oh, hey, like, they can do things that I can do. And I think it builds a more tolerant society that understands, and a less ableist society that hopefully we can get to the point where things are handicap accessible, because it's not just the people who have to live it every day that are fighting for it. So,
no,
yeah.
totally. That's
Let
great.
them ask
And the
questions.
kids are innocent, like they don't mean anything by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've had some pretty rude adults that have approached me and they're like, "What
They have no
happened to you?"
excuse. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Did your parents teach you manners?" Like there are some times that I do not have the tolerance for it. Me going to the grocery store and getting my groceries every day, not necessarily an inspiration. I know a lot of people make that joke because it has happened to most of us, like, "Oh, you're just so inspiring." And I'm like, you can tell me that when I'm on like a surfboard or a wakeboard or a
Yeah.
skate or
I'm
doing
buying
something.
milk.
I'm just trying to get my groceries so I can eat. Like we've all got to eat. So I don't really, but sure, yeah, okay.
Look, she's
Um,
getting eggs on her own.
yeah, wow, good
Yeah.
job. I'm like, ooh, we really have a distorted view of some people with disabilities. Some people have some distorted views with disabilities in society because I'm like,
Especially
what?
the people I've interviewed, like they've done like marathons, like 30 days in
Yeah,
a row,
yeah,
like in a
pretty
row.
impressive people. I'm like, have you watched the Paralympics ever? You know it exists, right? Like those people run just as fast. Like I know there are some like people who are competing in D1 level athletics that are blade runners, and I'm like, they didn't just accept them because they're disabled. They accepted them because they keep up with the able-bodied people.
You
Like
should look up one of the best wrestlers in the world has one leg.
I, I'm
Yeah.
not even surprised.
Yeah.
I'm like, there are some people, and I'm like, okay, my inspiration is not going to the grocery store. I can tell you that. Now, if you want to talk to me for a minute and understand my mindset and then say something like
Yeah.
that, sure, I don't have a problem with that. But just me trying to get a can of peas off of the like
Yeah,
thing,
it's like insulting that they're giving you a
I'm
compliment,
like,
but it's insulting almost. It's like doesn't
yeah, I'm like, this is not a compliment. I've had people just straight up walk up to me in like Lowe's and stuff, and I had a guy one time straight up walked up to me and he looked at me and he goes, "I gotta ask," and I immediately my brain was like, "No, you don't have to,"
yeah.
and he was like, "What happened to you?" And I just sat there for a second and I just looked at him and I was like, "You do know that that was like super rude, right?"
Yeah.
And he just dumbfounded looked at me like I was supposed to tell him my entire life story because I was walking around in a Lowe's. And I was like, I said, "Does anybody ever walk up to you and is like, why are you so old?" Like, that's rude. And he just kind of looked at me and he was
Yeah.
like, my bad. And I was like, I will tell you my story because you asked. I don't have a problem with that. I was like, but you should definitely learn how to talk to people. I was like, maybe this will serve you a lesson because not everybody's as nice as I am. I know that there are some people that would turn around and like lose their minds immediately if somebody asked them that way. So I was like, maybe don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Taught him a lesson, hopefully.
I hope so.
Well, thank you so much for coming on,
Of
Sydney.
course.
I guess that's it. Yeah. Thanks
Yeah,
for
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
yeah, totally. Everyone else, thanks for watching the Fighter Hard podcast. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Everyone have a good one.